Some of my favourite scenes in the Jurassic Park franchise are in Jurassic Park 3, and today we're adding all of them to our map of Isla Sorna. Welcome back to The Lost World. We spent the last 2 episodes building everything that you see in a Lost World film, and today it's the turn of Jurassic Park 3. We're going to be building the Ingen Compound, the river, the amazing Aviary, but we're starting with the Airstrip. This is where the first real action in Jurassic Park 3 takes place, and it's also the first time that we see the Spinosaurus. And it's a pretty simple build, so it shouldn't take too long. We're going to start with the runway using the flattening foundations to get that nice sand, flat. And we'll be using loads of decals in a minute to make this look really realistic. And then we'll build the few small buildings that you see on the edge of the runway, which all kind of dilapidated, they've just been abandoned. And as we've done so much of on this island, the pieces from the wetland pack are going to be really useful here. The way I've decided to lay out the Jurassic Park 3 elements on this island is to have them as much as possible separate from the Lost World parts of the build, because you don't see anywhere that you see in the Lost World in Jurassic Park 3 and vice versa. So these are all going to be clustered on the opposite side of the island to where everything we built for the Lost World is. That's the buildings pretty much done. We're going to add in the kind of flagpole. You can see when they land. And then finally, we'll use decals to make everything look realistic. We're going to have big tyre marks from the planes going down the centre of the runway. And then we'll use loads of the different dirt decals just to give everything that old kind of feeling that you see in the film. And there we go, that's the airstrip completed already. And we can move on to a much more complex build, the Aviary. This is just the placeholder we put here in episode 1. Time to make it look like the film. The scenes here are originally in the Jurassic Park novel. They were cut from the film to save money. They considered having them in the Lost World, which is why you kind of randomly see some pteranodons at the end of the film. And then finally, they actually made it for Jurassic Park 3. It's so good, but it presents us with some pretty serious challenges. The Aviary in the film is absolutely enormous, and unfortunately in the game, there's no way to make the Aviaries any taller than they are. You can only make them wider. So we kind of have a choice. We can either go down the kind of Planet Zoo style modular building route, build an exact replica of the Aviary, but not have any pteranodons in it, because they can only be either in an Aviary or completely free-flying with no interaction with building pieces. Or we can use the actual Aviaries and create a kind of scaled-down version of what you see in the film, and that is what we're going to do, because I want to see the pteranodons in here. The first thing to do is get the landscaping around the Aviary to match up with the film. We can't get the terrain any closer to the Aviary than it is, so I'm using the big boulder pieces to make the cliffs around it, and then any remaining terrain will be covered up with sunken trees to get the jungle feel that you see when you look at it from this angle here. We also use a little false perspective trick by taking some of the smallest trees and shrinking them down as small as they go and placing those on the top of the cliffs. Because we kind of know that trees are big. If we have very small trees, it sort of tricks the eye into thinking that they are far away rather than small, which helps to sell the large size of the Aviary that we're going for. And then we're going to move up above the Aviary and prepare the ground for where the observatory building that Grant etc. enter the building through, and the big fence that the Spinosaurus breaks. We'll add that in here. We've got pretty much the exact fence in the game already, which makes that nice and easy. So we're just going to curve it around there, smooth the terrain out, and join these grass panels onto the actual terrain to cover up the part where we can't get terrain in due to the Aviary. And then we're going to move back down to the river and add in the boat. I hadn't actually realised until I started this build that the lagoon boat in the game is based on the boat in Jurassic Park 3, but that is very handy for this build. So we're just going to start working on it and turning it into something that resembles the boat in the film much more closely. So we're going to add engines and lights, we're going to add the cage that they hide in, and then we're going to scale the boat up so it's about the same size you see in the film. We'll add some detailing down the sides with some ropes and various other pieces. There are 2 engines, I just put one on to begin with and then realised that, so we'll have the other one in a second and start getting it perfect. So if you're enjoying this video, by the way, don't forget to hit the like button and make sure you subscribe if you're new to the channel so you can see the rest of the series. Final episode will be out next week. Got a big barrel full of oil for the boat's engine here. We'll scale this up as well because this is a seriously hefty barrel. You can see it when Paul Kirby checks the oil levels. Make a couple of corrections to the lights, not happy with the one we've got here, get that other engine in, and that is the boat done. Really happy with how that looks. We've got the little cage that's fallen into the water behind it as well. Let's move on to the building that sits above the Aviary. This is one of the entrances to the Aviary. It's kind of the top entrance, I guess. It's where Grant etc. run to escape the Spinosaurus, and then from there they go down staircases into the Aviary itself. We're not going to have any way of making those staircases functional, but we're going to have the building up here and the Aviary below it. It's pretty much a circular building, so as usual we're going to build one slice of it and then rotate that around to create the rest of the building. We're going to do it in 2 groups. Just due to the way that the rotation works, we need to rotate the smaller roof in the center differently to the main roof that makes up the rest of the building. Color's not quite right here, it's a bit too blue, but we'll correct that before the end of the video. I'm a big fan of the grass panels that we've used to create this little area here. It really does match in seamlessly with the actual terrain and gives you a lot more freedom to build in places where the game won't normally let you build. Just got a little bit more rotating to do up here to get this part of the roof finished, and then once we've got that in, we just need to make some very small adjustments to this little roof piece here, make sure that's all perfect, and then we'll create the front door to the building. It's just some slabs of concrete and a door really, and then we'll make sure we position it so it's in exactly the right place, just above the aviary when you look at it from down here. And there we go, that's the entrance building complete. Time for our first dinosaur. Love recreating scenes from the film, so we'll get this as close to Jurassic Park 3 as possible. Here's our Spinosaurus. And there goes our fence. And now we can move on to building the inside of the aviary. There is a lot going on the interior of the aviary, and we're going to start with something that looks like it starts on the interior and then moves on to the exterior, which is some kind of massive gantry, which is probably a walkway. They don't really go into it in the film, you just see it in the long shots from the river, but it appears to extend from somewhere around the roof of the aviary out onto the cliffs next to it. So we're just going to make one piece and then clone that to create the gantry. We'll join it up with the cliffs, and then there's some sort of support wires. We'll build those using a metal column. I think it's one of the light supports or a lamppost or something like that. And then some of the wire generator pieces, which are so useful. We'll scale and rotate these until they join up with the aviary in the way that we want them to. And we'll use a similar piece to create the door that Grant and the rest of the group exit the aviary through. And then we'll start working on all the gantries and support columns and everything else inside the aviary that they're walking down when they get attacked by the pteranodons. These aviary perches are going to be really important for this build, because one of the key things that I want is that the pteranodons are able to actually sit in the gantries that go throughout the aviary like they do in the film. So we need to incorporate the aviary perches into the build so that the pteranodons can do that, but I want to incorporate them in such a way that you can't see that they're aviary perches. I want them to be a completely seamless part of the gantry. So once we've built a nice rusty gantry piece that gives the kind of birdcage effect that you see in the film, we're going to create various different pathways and then have the aviary perches look like support struts for them. They're recolorable, which is useful, so we can get them to the same kind of rusty shade as the gantries, and this will enable the pteranodons to actually land here. One of the key things in these scenes for me, as well as all the rusty, broken walkways like this, is the fog that fills the canyon that the aviary sits in, and we're going to replicate that by adding in a lot of the cypress swamp biome to the floor. We discovered in the last episode that if we add in the cypress biome and then use the bulldoze tool just to remove the individual trees, you can still get the fog, which is going to be really useful for setting the atmosphere in this build. Before we do that, we'll use some of the stair pieces and fences as well to join everything up nicely. And we can move on and start building the pillars of rock where they nest. These are nice and easy to build. We're just going to randomly rotate a load of rocks on top of each other and then scale them so they're a bit bigger at the bottom than they are at the top. Get us a nice pillar, and then we'll just have 4 of these positioned here, roughly like they are in the film, although obviously we're working on a much smaller scale here. And then once we've got them in the right position, we're going to take some of the bone statues and add these to the top. I'd love to have a nest over here, but you can only have nests on terrain, and you need a lot of terrain to put the nests on. But I think they look pretty good with the sunlight and the mist. And that is the final stage of the aviary done. It's time to get some pteranodons in and take a look at it. Despite the smaller size, I think this really looks like the scene in the film. And the pteranodons look amazing in here, flying through the fog. I positioned the cliff so that the sun comes through at just the right angle to illuminate it here, and with the pteranodons actually able to land on the middle of the gantry like they do in the film. Really happy with that. Let me know in the comments what you think of the aviary, because this was definitely the hardest thing to build in this episode. I'd love to know your thoughts on it. Let's move on to the next stage in Jurassic Park 3, which is the river. This is just a very brief scene in the film after the aviary, before the Spinosaurus attack, where they go past a section of the island full of brachiosaurs and ankylosaurs and various other dinosaurs. So I wanted to make sure that it was in here. We don't need to spend too much time on it, just flattening out a piece of land, getting the quite high bank that you can see as they go past it, and then we'll temporarily fill it with some dinosaurs, and here it is. I've got to say, I really don't like some of the visual choices they made in Jurassic Park 3, especially the brachiosaurs with the weird stripy patterns. But for this episode, we'll be using them to match up with the film. And with the river done, there's just one more place to build in this episode, right here below the aviary, the embryonics administration. In Jurassic Park 3, this set was built on top of the worker village set from The Lost World, and then parts of it were removed, parts of it were rebuilt, and parts of it were replaced digitally. And we're going to do something similar. We can actually use the base of the main building in the workers' village to create the embryonics administration building. We'll get rid of all the stuff that we don't need and then start adding in all the new stuff. It is going to have a name change, unfortunately, because the smallest font shrunk down to the smallest size is still too big to fit the words embryonics administration on the sign. So we're going to call it the Embryonics Lab. And we're even going to do a little bit of an interior on this building, which I don't think we've done in this series so far. Firstly, though, we're going to build the new roof. So we'll get rid of some of the projections that featured on the worker village building that don't feature on this, and then we'll start using these curved canvas pieces to make the dilapidated roof that this building has. We'll detail it using some of the girder pieces, both straight and curved in the various different places that you see them in the film. This complex is where the raptors are encountered in Jurassic Park 3, so we'll be adding the Jurassic Park 3 skinned raptors here, and next week when we turn this into an ecosystem, we're actually going to have two groups of raptors on the island, the Jurassic Park 3 ones here, and the Lost World ones over by the worker village and the long grass. This building's starting to come together, so let's start turning it into the overgrown kind of wilderness look that it has in the film. There's a big Ingen sign in the middle of the area, so we'll use the sign that we created for the worker village to make that. Surround that with loads of different plants and ferns, and then we'll start bringing in some of the clutter from that area as well. And then we'll move on to the interior. So we're going to build the counter with the Ingen sign behind it that has the phone and various other things on it. We're going to build most of this from this planter. So we've just recolored it, and then we're going to copy it and resize it underneath itself to get the counter, a few other pieces to detail it. We'll fill the entire building with rubbish, and later on we'll add some plants in here as well. And then we'll move on to the buildings that sit behind the embryonics administration. There's a big circular building with a really unique look. You don't really get a close look at it. I'm pretty sure this was just a digital building that they added in the background. I don't think it's part of the actual set. From what you can see in the film, it appears to be made out of rusted metal planks in a really interesting circular shape that gets higher as it goes round. So we'll create that here using these wood planks, which are about the closest we could get. And then we'll use colouring and some of the rust decals to make them look more like metal. I think I said this in the last episode, but it'd be great to get some more generic metal pieces in the game to help with builds like this. Although I think once we've got the colour right and once we add the rust decals to the top and dirt and things like that, we can get a pretty decent approximation of a metal building here. There's some windows as well, which we can create pretty easily just by shifting the position of some of the planks. And there we go, that looks pretty good, sat behind the main building there. There's another building next to it, so we'll get on with that. This is a pretty simple concrete construction. We'll just make it with some of the concrete pieces and some of the trim pieces. It's got a massive chimney on it, and after extensive searching, this gas tank is probably actually the closest to that we can use once we've recolored it. And then finally, we're going to turn this into an actual functioning park with an arrival point, hatchery, and response facility, which we're going to hide with buildings resembling what you can see in the aerial shot of this area when the characters first encounter it. These buildings are all but invisible unless you happen to be flying the camera directly over where they are. You can't really see them behind the main embryonics administration building, but we need infrastructure in this park, and I wanted to have somewhere permanent to keep them. So when you guys download it, you can add your own dinosaurs or do whatever you like with it. I've turned collision off so the infrastructure will work as it should do, and that is the embryonics administration area completed. Let's take a look at it. The main building sits in a pool of water, just like the building at the workers' village, and as we approach it through the jungle, I really like the dilapidated look. I've added some more of the cypress swamp so we get a bit of fog in here. Now if you look closely, we might just see some of the Jurassic Park 3 raptors running past. I love the shot in the film where the camera just lingers behind the characters and an out-of-focus raptor just runs past. So I thought we'd recreate that. And that is the majority of the building work for The Lost World completed. You can see everything we've built on the island here. The Ingen Compound, Aviary, and Airstrip are what we've built today. Next week, we're going to be attempting to turn this into a functioning ecosystem with a lot of dinosaurs and a lot more work. Thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you then.